What's up, agents, and welcome back to another Division video where I know it doesn't usually take a lot, but I am super confused over the brand new exotic gloves that are coming next season as the Climax exclusive reward. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Let's get straight into it. So they gave us this information in the patch notes recently that said that we're going to get these brand new exotic gloves with the talent Afterburn. Hitting enemies applies stacks to them. An enemy cannot have more than 20 stacks applied to them. When reloading your weapon, all stacks will be consumed to deal 2% weapon damage per stack to the enemy they are applied on. Now that doesn't necessarily indicate you can only do that on one enemy. It does say enemies cannot have more than 20 stacks. So if there's 5 enemies in the arena, you're going to be able to stack 20 stacks on each of them, as long as you've got the bullets in your mag before you actually hit the reload button. Now that again comes with a little bit of a problem, that if you're playing in a team and somebody kills the enemy that's got these stacks, then effectively that's wasted stacks and wasted damage. So already I'm leaning into the fact that these are actually solo play gloves rather than group play gloves, because you could very easily lose a lot of damage if people are killing your people that you've marked before you hit reload. So let's have a look at something else though. So it implies, I should say, that it's going to give us 2% of this number, essentially times by 20. Well, that is not a lot of damage at all. In fact, it's actually pretty terrible. So let's take a look at how it compares on some builds. We have to make some assumptions though before we do that, because we've never seen these gloves, we don't know anything about them. I'm going to assume they come like overdogs with crit hit chance, crit hit damage on, and weapon damage. And to be honest, that really doesn't matter too much, because what we're really trying to test here is the actual damage from the talent, and is it going to be worth running them over overdogs, over contractors gloves and other great options that we have available in the game right now. We're going to use this build to test it, all strikers, 55 crit chance and 117% critical hit damage, and the only time that that will change is that when we're going to factor in using contractors gloves instead of the overdogs, as well as the loaded for burr exotic gloves. So let's take a look at our first set of stats. Okay, so here is our first build. We've got our overdogs, assault rifle, Lexington. I put all of the stats in that we get in the stats page, nice and easy. We've got strikers on, overdogs. Now, there is one thing here. We are assuming overdogs is up 100% of the time. We'll play with that a little bit more later on. We've got strained, obliterate, and we're not going to change any of this, so it doesn't really matter what talent or gun that we have on. There is obviously a little bit of talk around the mag size and things like that, and there is some strange behavior as well. Obviously you think about some lesser guns that only have 5 in the mag and things like that, they behave a little bit differently. But we've got prototype, we're not going to do any of that, and there you go, you can see exactly the build that we've got, how much damage we would do. I've included this brand new accuracy bar. Somebody talked about this in one of my comments. It sets at 100% as default, but if you're bad at hitting shots and only hit 50% of your shots, you'll see your new damage values there as well. And what we'll do is, for this test, we're just going to put our headshot rate at 30%. All right, so that's great. So then we're going to copy this build to B, and that gives us exactly the same. But what we are going to do, we're going to go to build B, and we're going to call this Afterburn. Afterburn. And what we're going to do, we're going to put the talent in instead of the, well, not the talent. We're going to swap our gloves from overdogs to our loaded for burr. And we're going to put it in, as it says there in the notes here for now, until I know exactly how they work, as written. So this is exactly what we talked about before in our stats page, the weapon damage number. It's 2% of that number times by 20. And essentially that's always giving us 8 bullets worth of damage extra because of how that maths works out. So if we scroll down, you can see here that we drop off massively, and we're only going to be looking at sustained DPS because we don't take reloads into account when we calculate our burst DPS. But you can see here we drop off damage wise huge, 23%. And if that talent is written how they actually work, essentially nobody's going to use these. They're going to be really D or A. And that's why I started thinking, actually, maybe there's something wrong with the description on the patch notes that we got. And potentially, what if it's a little bit different? What if the reload in your weapon, all stacks will be consumed and deal 2% weapon damage, and meaning 2% of the weapon damage you have dealt per stack to the enemy they are applied on. Now that sounds like some pretty difficult maths for the game, with something that I don't think we really do in the game anywhere else, because it's going to have to store that value of every bullet you hit on the enemy, what the 2% damage value is. And of course at that point as well, it's taken into effect your team buffs, your gear buffs, because it's literally taking 2% of the actual bullet damage that you see on the screen. And that makes much more sense to me, because if we do that, so again, if we copy this to slot C, go to C, and we're going to change the loaded for burr here, if it scales off damage dealt instead, and we are going to scroll down, and you can see they actually catch up a little bit. They're only 10% lower than overdogs. So let's, for argument's sake, at this point now, to D. I'm going to make a little change here. We're going to drop 12% critical hit damage, because we're going to put contractor's gloves into our calculations. We're going to put 8% armor damage in there, and the rest of it would stay the same. And then we're going to scroll down to, we've gone past it, keep going past it, to this. We're going to put this to none, because now we don't have any exotic piece in whatsoever. And we need to name these a little bit better. So D is going to be called contractors. We'll call C Afterburn DJT, because that's my theory on how the damage talent actually does work. B is regular Afterburn, and A is overdogs. And if we scroll down a little bit here now as well, you can see we've got our better results. So you can see that the Afterburn, if works how it seems to be worded, comes in right at the bottom. Contractor's gloves come in at D, which we know, if they're not prototyped and they don't have echo in, it's pretty common knowledge that overdogs still win. Then we've got the version of events that I think it might actually be, and you can see it's 10.8%. But we've got to remember here, this is 100% uptime on overdogs, and we're probably never going to get 100% uptime on overdogs unless you're an absolute demon. So if we go to where I have here, and let's just, for argument's sake, not be too harsh, let's just say we're really good at the game and our uptime is actually going to be 80%. You can see here that they still win. We're still winning by 6.5%. And if we then drop this down to 70%, overdogs are still winning by 4.1%, but it's getting incredibly close. And I think the general feel around the community is that overdogs is up around 60% of the time if you don't really try too hard or anything like that. And as you can see, they come in still the best, but at 1.7%, only giving you a 40% margin for error with your overdogs. Any lower, say we went down to 50%, the Afterburn new gloves, the loaded for burr, start to take over. But essentially, you can't run these in a group, because if you run them in a group and someone kills the enemy, like we said earlier on, it's actually going to take away that damage dealt, and therefore it means absolutely nothing to you. You might as well run anything else, because that is going to guarantee that it's going to net you the damage. So yeah, unknown how that's going to work out. There's other options here as well, like, you know, if it does work, you know, per damage of the bullet that I've talked about, does it just take the bullet damage? Does it account for a headshot? Does it account for a crit? There's a load of options here that we can't really account for, because we've got absolutely zero information about them at all. But I don't believe that the talent description that we got is correct. I just don't think they could bring them into the game so lacking by making it literally 2% of the damage value that we have here, because they would just really be dead on arrival. And yeah, for an end of season climax reward, we want stuff to be exciting. And after having the underboss, which for me was a little bit underwhelming, no pun intended, I really wanted something really good this season. These sound like they could be really good, but they either need buffing massively if it is something to do with this stat here, or if it's how I've calculated it the other way around, then maybe it's not so bad. Maybe they're actually pretty good, and they'll come in seriously useful when it comes to solo play. But there is one other caveat that we have to kind of think about a little bit, in the fact that if you kill an enemy, so if you kill an enemy that's got, say, 20 stacks and you've not reloaded, again, that is wasted damage. So there is going to be, you know, a super situational feel to these gloves, essentially, depending on how you run them. Overdogs potentially could just be better in almost every situation, which is a little bit unfortunate. But, you know, if you're doing boss damage and you're not going to kill the boss in one magazine, then these might actually play in. You know, if you took them into the new incursion, they actually might fit in very well if they do the damage how I think they're going to do it. So I do think they'll be very, very situational. I just think that they need to not work how they're written in the patch notes, and hopefully we'll get some clarity about that this week, because I expect that we're probably going to see next season's patch notes come in a complete form, as they're going to be at Gamescom, and I very much expect that during them live streams we'll probably get the information for next season. Anyway, that is my theory crafting video for Loaded for Burr. Am I right? Am I wrong? Definitely can't wait to see what you guys say in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Check this calculator out on DJTICKLE.com if you want to have a go yourself. I'll pop the link down below for the builds that I were using. And as always, agents, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.